You're listening to the Film File right here on No Barriers Radio, the film show for film geeks by film geeks.
Hello and welcome to the Film File. I'm Andy Meakin, and we're not available to do one of our normal shows this week, so there won't be any news roundup, there won't be any look ahead to what's coming out, there's no new reviews. But what I've done is I've put together a little themed compilation of a few old deep dives from the early years of the show that you may not have heard. And the theme that I've gone for, well, with Spielberg having a brand new film due out this coming week, Disclosure Day, a return to sci-fi, I cast my eyes back to the early days of the show when we spoke about films such as War Horse, which at that point was a film that I'd never seen, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Raiders of the Lost Ark, plus other Indiana Jones films, and 1941. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this look back at a few films from the career of one of the most beloved directors on the planet.
Okay, so as you know, if you've been an avid listener to the show, that I've been setting Andy a challenge every week to watch a film that he's missed at the cinema. And usually these are Oscar-winning films. They're all Oscar-winning films, aren't they, Andy?
Yeah, it's even films that I missed at the cinema because I wasn't born.
Well, you allowed that. I'll give you that one. But there have been a few.
There's a few that I should have watched at the cinema, yes.
And we've had some interesting choices. We saw The Town. We did Election last week. And a little bit of change of pace. And I said, this is the film that I just blubbed all the way through like an 11-year-old girl. And it's a film that you've not seen, which is Steven Spielberg's War Horse.
We are at war! We are at war!
I promise you that I'll look after him. I'll respect him, and if I can, I'll return him to your care.
War Horse, rated PG-13.
Written by Lee Hall, Richard Curtis, based on a 1982 novel of the same name. And of course, there's a stage play adaptation of the same film. It's set before and during World War I, telling the story of Joey, a thoroughbred horse raised by a young British lad called Albert, who is bought by the British Army, leading him to encounter numerous individuals and owners throughout Europe. And it's a war-torn Europe, while experiencing some of the most dreadful tragedies of the war that happens around him. And the story is told through the eyes of a horse. As a DreamWorks film, it's probably not one of the more famous Steven Spielberg film. Didn't seem to set the world on fire, even though it was named one of the best top 10 films of 2011. But it's all down to what you thought of it, Andy, not what I thought about it. Tell us what you thought about War Horse, and did you too cry like a 11-year-old girl?
I'll start off by saying no, I didn't cry.
Oh, you man of steel, you.
Oh, I'm a rock. With the film, I mean, the film is an adaptation of a children's book. If Michael Moore-Pogo was the writer of the book, I believe.
That's right,
And like you've described it follows through the eyes of a horse as it goes through these events through wartime. And watching it, I couldn't help but think, if that was just a rough collie, this would be a Lassie film. Because it's got that same structure of one of the Lassie kind of films where Lassie starts off with a loving family but gets separated and gets embroiled in like tragedy, war, etc., 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 before finally making the way home. It's that kind of simple story, bouncing from mini adventure to mini adventure while the world changes around them.
And as you said, though, and it's pointing out, it is a children's novel, and that is very much of a plot line of a children's novel. Something happens, a little bit of history, etc. I mean, you can use that sort of genre style to a lot of kids' film. Lassie is almost a perfect example of that. I'll give you that.
And as a film, it's a great family adventure film that also offers some elements of history in there to educate the youngsters as they're doing it. And this is what makes good children's films. The good children's films are the ones that can educate whilst also entertaining.
And not talk down to children.
And it doesn't talk down at all. And it's an eclectic who's who of British thespians. Every time a new scene started in a new section of like the war and it was different cast members coming in, I was like, hang on, that's Benedict Cumberbatch. Hang on, there's Tom Hiddleston, David Thewlis, Toby Kebbell. So many familiar faces popping up left, right and centre, and all really putting their all into the story. Peter Mullen is fantastic at the start and the end of the films. He bookends the film. Emily Watson is magnificent. And the cast are all on fine form. But for me, Spielberg takes a somewhat melodramatic approach that didn't quite resonate with me.
Okay.
And some of his production choices, which him and his cinematographer came up with, for the lighting and backdrop choices, gave the film an almost 1940s and 50s style aesthetic that looked kind of out of place at times. You had like the pink and purple sunsets, and it was like, hang on, this is supposed to be in the south of England. That's not an English sunset. There was moments that made it look like a film and broke me out of the fact that it could have been an immersive journey because it looked produced, but it
does have an old Hollywood feel to it. I'll absolutely give you that. It does look like
you could say
there was once shot on a studio lot.
A Gone with the Wind kind of lavishness to some of the moments.
In the art direction.
There's some great standout moments in it, though. I mean, there were moments that I was completely captivated by it. And whilst I didn't cry, I could feel myself like really starting to connect with this horse. The No Man's Land rescue is possibly one of the finest scenes in the film. After it's tried its desperate like galloping through the trenches of the German army and then across no man's land and gets trapped within all the barbed wire fencing, and then you get a soldier from each side having that touching moment of humanity to rescue this horse.
This is not a film that actually pulls its punches when it talks about World War One, which for an American filmmaker, World War One didn't have much of an impact on the US as it did to the UK and to Europe. You know, it was millions of horses were sent abroad from the UK, and only sort of 62,000 returned. The rest dying or got slaughtered in France for meat. So it was a film that has a huge emotional impact on it, and the fact. And this is always Spielberg's magic that he manages to pour into. He makes the horse empathetic, that you understand what it's feeling and you understand the pain and the joy that it goes through on the journey. You're not just a witness to what's happening to this beautiful animal. You feel its emotions. And you know, if this was an animated film, the horse would speak, but he does it in so many different ways that helps you form a bond with an on-screen animal without ever making it anthropomorphic in any way.
The horse has a very distinctive personality. It's a very belligerent horse, but it's also a very, very loyal horse at the same time. And yeah, you do get to really connect with the horse at moments through the film. What I found stunning about this is I discovered afterwards that there's only 3 digital effects used in the whole film for a total of about 3 seconds.
That's right, yeah.
And when you see some of the moments, like the aforementioned horse galloping through the crowded trenches of through the fences of the battlefield, to know that was done for real, that's a stunning piece of filmmaking, and that shows the skill and confidence that Spielberg does have in handling, you know, not only like a cast but animals as well.
And where special effects do take over, because it is a combination of real horses, you say a little bit of CGI, but a lot of it's animatronic horses, and you never see the join, which is always what good special effects is about. You tell me what's real, what's puppetry, what's CGI, because at any point in that film you don't know, and that's the strength of it, because you're caught up in the story. You're not looking for the seams, so to speak.
The end result of this film was a family adventure film set during war that delivers exactly what it meant to. It was meant to be a family adventure film. It didn't quite captivate me as well as it did you, but I still enjoyed it, and I didn't feel it dragged at any point. It's just not something that I felt that I'm not that bothered if I watch it again. I thought it was a great experience to watch it. There was moments that kind of let it down, but there was enough strong moments and some great acting throughout it that lifted it. And another John Williams score that is just majestic.
It's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it is one of those films that's like his score. It's powerful and moving, and I think the story on this film is it's a powerful, moving story. And but the heart of it is it's a children's film, and it's a children's film that doesn't rely on cheap gags or even cheap sentiment, to that matter. Even though it's very moving in places, it's a good old fashioned film. It's when they say they don't make films like this anymore. Actually, yes, they do.
It was nominated for Best Score, Best Picture, Art Direction, Cinematography, and the 2 sound categories. Won none of them, but that's because this was the same year of The Artist and Hugo, so it didn't stand a chance, let's be honest.
So moving swiftly along to this week's Deep Cut. Going back to the heady days of 1977, this American science fiction film, written and directed by Steven Spielberg, introduced us to the notion of we are not alone in the classic Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Wake up. Honey, Ronnie, wake up. You're not going to believe what I saw. Ronnie?
Oh, don't. Not now.
No, listen, Ronnie, I never would have believed it. There was this, in the cab, there was this whole, there was a red whoosh that, where? This was
Roy,
really...
I called you. And, well, Governor, they want you to call them right away. They said they couldn't reach you.
I turned the radio off.
Couldn't do that. The phone's ringing off the hook. It woke Sylvia up 2 times already. I think you better call them.
You know those pictures in the National Geographic about the aurora borealis? This is better than that. This is really... Come on, Ronnie. Get up. Come on.
Oh, Roy, what's wrong?
Nothing's wrong. I don't know if anything's wrong. Get up. I'm not kidding. Come on.
Is that an accident?
No, it's not an accident. You wanted to get out of the house anyway, right?
Oh, not at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Ronnie, I need you to see something with me. It's really important.
Okay, all right. What about the kids?
What? Oh, the kids. I'll get the kids.
So this came out in 1977 on the back end of Star Wars, and it was really one of those films that is now has become part of the summer tradition. Big idea, big concept science fiction films. Spielberg was in familiar territory, having already done this with Jaws. Along came Star Wars, and then along came Close Encounters. The film starred Richard Dreyfuss as Roy Neary, an everyman, an electric lineman, watches his life and quite ordinary world turn upside down after a close encounter with a UFO. I'm going to get this out of the way right at the top end of this. I absolutely adore Close Encounters, as much as I adore Star Wars and Superman the movie from that period. It's a huge part of my growing up. It's a huge part of making me the person I am today, the film fan that I am. And that's down to Steven Spielberg's quite wonderful Close Encounters. I've seen it all its forms. I have a preferred version, which we'll get to as we go through. But I can't knock Close Encounters. I watched it very recently when I knew we were going to be doing this, and it still blows me away. It has drama. It has amazing special effects. It has an epic quality. It's painted on a huge canvas. However, at the heart of it is a very, very human story. And that's what really makes this film work. I'm currently reading an earlier draft written by Paul Schrader. And what Spielberg brought to this and what made it absolutely unique is by making his lead character a typical guy, an everyman, a person whose life is turned upside down by the discovery and recognition of the idea that there are beings from other worlds, and he's brought into this bigger world than it's outside of his worldview. It's a fantastic notion that really brought Spielberg into being the director that he is, and of course paved the way for E.T. So that's initially my thoughts on Close Encounters. Andy, what are yours?
As with yourself, this is a film that really hit me at an early age. This was one of those films, like with Star Wars, that I got to see on the big screen, and it drew me into a love of what can be done on the big screen, what can be done in film, and what can be done with sci-fi. Star Wars gave me action, it gave me adventure, it gave me lightsabers, it gave me thrills. This gave me conceptual sci-fi of a very downbeat nature, but with grand explorations. I've seen people gripe online about this over the past week, that nothing happens in the film, complaining that there's no excitement. But I think those people clearly miss the whole point of the film. It's a film about obsession with the unknown, where the thrills in the discovery that you aren't going crazy and you might get to touch that in which you truly believe. It's a simple tale of ordinary people affected by extraordinary events, and Spielberg tells this so perfectly. You can see where Spielberg learned the lessons that he learned during making Jaws, because when he was making Jaws, he wanted to show the shark off very early on, but the way that the shark never worked meant he had to tease glimpses. He had to keep the shark hidden. And by learning that keeping things hidden make it more effective, benefits this film, because we only get small glimpses of light and craft early in the film. We get teasers of the wonders to come. And Spielberg knows what to show exactly and when. I mean, the early scene with Roy Neary's encounter in his truck is played out from inside the truck. You just see lights, and then a huge light, and then the truck is lifted by gravity and he's thrown about in it, but you don't see what did that, and that makes it all the more curious. It makes you engaged. It makes you understand how he's had this encounter. He doesn't know what with, and he's desperate to find out what with, and how it affects him throughout. You can follow that journey as it goes along. Spielberg saves the full reveals for a rather spectacular end, and boy, when it comes, is it spectacular. The detail on those crafts at the end are just wondrously beautiful. And adding in throughout the film this musical language in order to communicate that the encounters had kind of passed to humanity to try to decipher, it just took a whole new way of doing Aliens.
I couldn't agree more. And it disappoints me to say that people have said this film that nothing happens, because an awful lot happens. An awful lot of internal drama. And this film is, at its pure heart, is a drama. It's about one man's sense of discovery, leaving his life behind for something that has changed him so remarkably. And as you said, the reveals of the UFOs are absolutely dramatically happen at the right place. Just when you don't think you're going to see anything, there's some kind of a light show as we see the initial UFOs. But Spielberg holds off. There's the impending sense of what's going to happen. And the first time you see the mothership appear over the top of the Devil's Tower in Wyoming, it's breathtaking. There's a sense of joy, a sense of apprehension, fear, and it all comes from that initial shot. And you know that those characters' lives have been changed tremendously. I mean, Steven Spielberg started this as one of his own handmade films, a film called Firelight, which incorporated a lot of the ideas of Close Encounters and what it became. And he spent a lot of time trying to get this made, and studios rejected it. You know, this is a film about flying saucers from outer space, and they just didn't get it. And then Jaws landed for him, and he was the biggest director in the world, and everybody wanted to work with him. As I said, he originally went to Paul Schrader to write the script. Paul Schrader, who gave us Taxi Driver, and Spielberg said that when he visited Schrader, it was one of the most disappointing and most embarrassing screenplays ever professionally turned into a major film studio. It was a terribly guilt-ridden story, not about UFOs at all, entitled Kingdom Come. And the protagonist was a 45-year-old Air Force officer who'd worked on Project Blue Book, and the government is there to ridicule and debunk flying saucers. But when he makes contact, he works on a mission to try and make contact, a long way removed from Spielberg's vision. And Spielberg sat down and wrote the script himself, and worked with David Giler, who performed a rewrite. Hal Barwood and Matthew Robbins, who were friends of Spielberg, suggested the plot device of kidnapping the child. The story grew and turned out less to be Kingdom Come, to be the Close Encounters of the Third Kind that we know today. Interestingly enough, Spielberg, when he started making the film, reached out to the US Air Force and NASA, who declined to cooperate with the film, and in fact wrote a 20-page letter to Spielberg saying that this film was dangerous. And in Spielberg's own way, if NASA took the time to write that, then he knew there must be something happening and something they had to think about. It's a fantastic movie, works on many, many different levels, and works on those levels because he doesn't take the easy route. He goes with the small town guy, the everyman, fantastically portrayed by Richard Dreyfuss, and he incorporates himself into this and how a UFO encounter would change us. And that's the magic of the film. Not just the amazing special effects, the magic of what if it was us.
Up until this point, it's very rare that you got an alien invasion kind of film where the aliens weren't bad guys. This was a very optimistic first contact approach to take to sci-fi. And Spielberg delivered it fantastically. And it's a theme that he would later explore with E.T., with another peaceful alien visiting Earth, but that played on a completely different level, but still had that optimistic, the aliens are not to be feared. We should be feared more than the aliens. It's a cracking film. And I originally saw, obviously, the original version when I was a kid. And then there was the special edition, which when that special edition first came out, where Spielberg got given a chance to go back and retouch things up, but he had to include an additional extension to the end scene to show the interior of the mothership. Something that he was insistent that he didn't want to do, but in order to get a chance to go back and make tweaks that he wanted to do, he had to agree to this. And I remember seeing that when it first came out and thinking, oh, wow, that's something different at the end, but never feeling as enamored by it. And it kind of nulled the film a bit for me. But then a good few years later, he had a chance to revisit it and do his director's cut, which he got a chance to add more scenes back in, but took away that inside the mothership ending. And he delivered, for me, the perfect version of it. The more recent director's cut version is the perfect representation of Spielberg's vision in this film. And that's the one that I revisited this past few weeks. And that's the one that I revisit every couple of years and love each and every time that I watch it.
I'm always enamored every time I watch it. And just like you, Andy, I go to the director's cut. It features the best moments out of the special edition, which is the ship in the Gobi Desert, for instance. It builds in smaller ways. What I missed from the special edition was the heartfelt moments that Dreyfuss has with his wife. And I really disliked them entering the mothership as much as you did, and clearly as much as Spielberg did. But this version is an absolute superb. It's a definitive version of Close Encounters. And it just proves what a spectacular movie, that even after 40 odd years of it being out there, it can still be inspiring. I can still be awestruck by it, and I can fall in love with it the next time that I watch it. And I will watch it again and again, just like you, and I will keep going back and revisiting Close Encounters at the right time.
It's a film that when I revisit, there's some films that you revisit as comfort watchers and you'll half watch them while doing other things. But this is a film that when I revisit it, my attention is focused 100% on everything that's going on. Even though I know what's going on, I love to see it all unravel again on the screen in front of me.
Yeah, it's, as we talked about with Star Trek, a big ideas film in a way that some science fiction now, and I'm not just looking at you, Tomorrow War, but this is the kind of science fiction where it deals with big ideas and big themes, dramatically and beautifully put together and structured. And I kind of miss that side of Spielberg. We don't see that Spielberg anymore because he's grown, absolutely. But I do miss that Steven Spielberg very much.
You're listening to No Barriers Radio, and you're listening to the Film File, the film show for film geeks by film geeks. And if you're enjoying the show, then check out the Film File podcast, which you can find quite easily by heading over to your favorite podcast platform, searching for the Film File, hitting that subscription button, and leaving a like. More to come on No Barriers Radio, and more to come on the Film File. And you can get in touch with us right here at FilmFile HQ by simply
heading over to social media platforms, search for FilmFile UK. You can get in touch with us through there. You can email us, podcast@filmfile.uk. Get in touch with us with any thoughts on films, any films that you want us to deep dive at some point, any films that you disagree with our opinions on. Feel free. We're always open to listen to other sides of the story.
So much has been said about our deep dive today that I don't know if we can offer anything new to the discussion, but we can certainly bring our enthusiasm to it. It came out in 1981. It was directed by Steven Spielberg, written by Lawrence Kasdan, based on the story by George Lucas and Philip Kaufman. It starred Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, Paul Freeman, Ronald Lacey, John Rhys Davis, and Denham Elliott. And it changed people's lives. And all you have to do is hear this little bit of music to know what film we are talking about.
The Ark. It is something that man was not meant to disturb.
An army which carries the Ark before it is invincible.
Indiana Jones!
Let her go.
Snakes. Why did it have to be snakes?
I'm going after that truck.
Oh, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go. Trust me.
Conceived back in the 1970s, George Lucas was seeking to modernize the serial films of the early 20th centuries. You know the ones, the Republic features, your Flash Gordons, your Buck Rogers, and developed his idea with filmmaker Philip Kaufman, who suggested the Ark of the Covenant as the film's goal. Lucas eventually focused on developing this 1977 little-known space opera known as Star Wars, but always wanted to keep the idea of Raiders of the Lost Ark going, and he resumed that with Steven Spielberg. They chatted about the project for several months. The pair had ideas and set pieces and stunts for the film, and they hired Lawrence Kasdan to fill in the narrative gaps and create what we now know as a classic film. Yes, there have been sequels. Yes, there's even been a prequel. But there is something about Raiders of the Lost Ark which, in all honesty, is still the best one for many, many reasons. Now, to give it a bit of context, I saw this at the ABC Cinema in Sheffield. And for some reason, I was late to the party because my parents had seen it before me and kept telling me how much I should go and see this film. I don't know why I was late to the party. I can't answer that now in hindsight, but I was. And then I went to see it. And you know what? Then I went to see it again and again and again. Came out on VHS, owned it on that, owned it on DVD, have it on Blu-ray, and it's still a go-to because it's so damn exciting and so damn charming. Andy, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I was a wee little lad of 8 years old when this came out. It's 4 decades old. 4 decades. I remember this film being everywhere. On TV, we had behind-the-scenes specials. There were posters up advertising it on hoardings. Everywhere you looked, people were talking about it. The must-see film. And especially for a lad of my age, who I used to relish watching reruns of the action-adventure serials each morning during the summer holidays. I used to love those kind of things. So this was that brought to vivid life. Of course, it was one of those films I got to see on the big screen on initial release, and I've lapped up every opportunity to rewatch it in latter years through the VHS release, TV showings over Christmas or bank holidays, DVD, Blu-ray like yourself. It's a regular revisit, and it's something that still lives up to scrutiny today. And in recent years, a remastered cinema release gave me an opportunity to revisit it on the big screen all over again and still fall in love with it from the start. Ford is absolutely perfect in the role of the archaeologist with a fondness for a bullwhip and a fedora. His grizzled approach works so well for this adventurer. The storyline of seeking the Ark of the Covenant also leads to him opening old wounds at the same time, one of those wounds being the marvellous Karen Allen as Marion Ravenwood, who, rather than just being a damsel in distress in this film, it's her tough, feisty and spirited nature that make her stand out as something much more than what latter films would have as the female lead. The pair of them bicker and bounce off each other with a chemistry that lends well to the film. And you've already mentioned the support cast in the rundown of who's in this, but how good is Paul Freeman as René Belloc?
Yeah.
The rival archaeologist aiding the Nazis is charmingly evil. You actually like him,
even though you absolutely hate him at the same time. And then you've got Ronald Lacey as Major Tote, who is just twisted and menacing throughout. The poor guy would probably get punched by people in the street for being such a nasty piece of work in this film because he's so good in it. And then you've got like the magnificent roles of like played by Denham Elliott and John Rhys-Davies, giving some light comic relief that never overpowers the serious adventure drama of the whole film. This is a film that I absolutely adore. The action, the adventure, and the spectacle make it work. And Spielberg and his cinematographer Douglas Clockham absolutely deliver on making sure that every scene looks amazing and plays well.
And it was Lucas's love of those early serials, as I said before, the Buck Rogers, the Flash Gordons. And in fact, if you remember correctly, that initially Lucas wanted to get the rights to Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
And ended up not being able to do that and made Star Wars instead. And if you ever read any of the early Star Wars scripts, they were much more Flash Gordon than they were the Star Wars that we know today. But while he was finishing American Graffiti back in '73, he had an old movie poster of a heroic character leaping from a horse to a truck. And it reminded Lucas of that love of those old, early serial films, in particular things like Fighting Legion and Spy Smasher and Dan Winslow of the Navy. And there was a particular Charlton Heston, which was he played a leather-jacketed adventurer. And all those stuck. And he created the iconic character of Indiana Smith. Wait a minute, you say? Indiana Smith? Well, yeah, that was the original title. The name Indiana comes from the name of Lucas's dog, but originally the character was Indiana Smith. So he worked out the idea with Philip Kaufman, with the intent that Kaufman would direct. Kaufman brought in the idea of the Ark of the Covenant, and that led into the idea of the Nazis because of Hitler's fascination historically with the occult. Lucas wanted Kaufman to direct the film, but because he was already committed to working on the Western The Outlaw Josie Wales with Clint Eastwood, Lucas paused this idea and again returned to working on Star Wars. And of course, we all know what happened then. Spielberg and Lucas used to have a little bit of a tradition where they go on vacation to Hawaii to avoid any potential negative reviews about the theatrical debut of their films. And with Spielberg, they talked about this idea of wanting to create their own action hero. And Spielberg wanted to direct a James Bond film, but Lucas pitched him The Adventures of Indiana Smith. Still hoping that Kaufman would direct, it was quite clear that Spielberg was the man to replace him. And as I said before, they brought in Lawrence Kasdan, a great writer who'd been working in Hollywood, who again created a lavish screenplay. And he brought in those elements of the Magnificent Seven, the idea of the anti-hero, an archaeologist, because originally, funny enough, Indiana Smith was a nightclub owner. And we saw hints of that in the sequel. And they basically pieced together enough of a film that several elements were cut and dropped into Temple of Doom. But all those elements created the Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark that we know today. And it is an absolutely classic movie. Now, because of it being set in a different time, that's one of the reasons that makes it feel absolutely timeless, because it ties into our shared knowledge of the cliffhanger story. It gives it this sense of always feeling fresh because we know the beats intrinsically. It is the perfect hero. And with Harrison Ford in the lead, it just gave it that charisma. But Andy, you're about to tell me that it wasn't necessarily always going to be Harrison Ford.
Yes, initially Harrison Ford wasn't up for it. Now, it seems like a daft thing when you say it now. How come Harrison Ford wasn't going to be involved? Surely he was huge, what with, that Star Wars thing, and he knew Lucas, so wasn't he the ideal fit? No, it was originally going to be Tom Selleck. Yes, Magnum PI himself, who was a huge name at the time, was the lead that they wanted for this role. And I can kind of see it. When I think about it, I can kind of see it. Even though Harrison Ford definitely made the role his own, I can see why they wanted to go for a Selleck kind of approach. He's got the kind of nature that would have fitted into it, maybe played it slightly differently. And obviously, we wouldn't have had at least one of the most iconic moments of the film. Let's talk about some of the moments, because from the opening scene, Indy raiding the Peruvian temple, resulting in the iconic and oft-emulated fleeing from a rolling boulder,
to the bloody finale of chilling effects, it's packed with action set pieces and moments that land well. And the circumstances on set change some scenes, most notably that moment with a swordsman flourishing his blade in a show-offy way as he's ready to attack Indy in the middle of the markets, and Indy just casually takes his gun out and shoots him and moves on. It's a moment that was supposed to be an epic fight, but because Ford himself wasn't feeling well at the time, he insisted that, I've got a gun, why don't I just shoot him? And so they shot it and went, actually, that's actually worked so much better. And Ford was known for doing this on Star Wars, that he said that things were nonsense and hokey and didn't make sense, and he would call things out. I think with Indiana Jones, his attitude of doing that worked to the benefit of the film, because he didn't just sit there and accept nonsense in the script. He would question it, and they would change the script around it to make it work and feel like it's a natural thing.
It's kind of interesting because, as you said, you can't really think of Indiana Jones as other than Harrison Ford, because he poured, or you feel he poured, so much of himself into it. And the reason he wasn't initially cast was his connection to Star Wars. It was seen as too close. Some of the other names that were considered, people like Nick Nolte, Tim Matheson, Peter Coyote, Jeff Bridges, Sam Elliott, Harry Hamlin were all considered. And it was because of Tom Selleck's relationship to Magnum PI and the actor strike of 1980 put that show on hiatus, which wouldn't have allowed Selleck to star as Jones. And even though, to be honest, Selleck did have a go at almost making a couple of Raiders of the Lost Ark style movies, it never really worked out for him as a big screen hero. He always worked better on the tube as opposed to movies. But there were so many iconic moments. I mean, the set pieces are fantastic all the way through. All the stunts are absolutely have a real sense of weight to them. Felt that Indy was taking the knocks. Indy would be hurt. There's a real sense of threat that runs through the entire movie. And that's one of the elements that's missing for me from Temple of Doom, because it's a prequel. And you know that Indy will survive. You never felt that Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark would make it intact to the end of the movie. And that was one of the key elements of it. The fact that it goes from fighting Nazis to the supernatural, made it for me. Give me those two elements in any sort of movie. Make it mysterious, make it supernatural, then I am in. That is my kind of a movie, and not just and it could have gone either way. It could have been a purely supernatural movie, or it could have been a pure action film. But combining those two elements absolutely makes it work for me. It lands every time. We talked about 1941 and the effect that 1941 had on Spielberg as a filmmaker. This film was lean. He brought it on time, brought it in on budget, made him a better filmmaker. And because of the 1941 curse, Spielberg works very, very hard all the way through to bring this in on as tight a budget as absolutely possible. And it's kind of, the fact that it lacked some of the money and some of the budget that they wanted made them more creative. I think if it had been overscheduled and over budget, like 1941, for instance, I don't think we'd have had Spielberg being as creative as he was in this particular film. Absolutely adore it. I mean, we can't talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark without talking about subsequent sequels and where they went. So in running order, Temple of Doom is okay. Don't dislike it. Likes more supernatural quality than I would have liked, and makes it much more sort of a routine action film. Love Last Crusade, and the less said the better about Kingdom of the Air. I can't remember what the full title was, and I don't really care.
Temple of Doom felt like it was a rushed out sequel just to try to cash in on the success of Raiders. I don't like the character Willie Scott, played by Kate Capshaw. After we just had Karen Allen as the fierce, feisty, and also very self-determined Marion, to go and have Kate Capshaw as basically a screaming, girly damsel in distress throughout is an annoyance. And whilst it's got some great moments, the opening club scuffle is packed with fun peril. The minecart escape is thrilling, and the rope bridge is absolutely jaw-droppingly tense. But they dropped in a film that felt tired, and it felt like it was just a collection of action set pieces with a loose story around it, whereas the first one felt like a journey. Then you got to the third film, and boy, am I so glad that they picked things up for The Last Crusade. Indy finding his father, Sean Connery, who went missing whilst tracking down the Legend of the Holy Grail.
Which is almost so meta, isn't it? That you brought
Yeah.
Sean Connery in to play the father of Indiana Jones. As I said, Spielberg wanted to direct a Bond movie.
We're back into Nazi territory with the Nazis seeking religious iconography. And this film is a solid final entry in the series. From the opening prologue showing young Indy seeking to stop the threat of an artifact, to a biplane dogfight, desert tanks battle, and much, much more. And it flows with a narrative that is genuinely clue-piecing together from one scene to the next. The chemistry between Ford and Connery works so well that if anyone doesn't feel a tear in their eye when Connery's Henry Jones Sr. finally calls his son Indiana, you're dead to me. If you don't feel yourself welling up at that, you're dead to me, because that is the defining moment of their relationship. It closes with a genuine ride into the sunset, the perfect end to the series. So why on earth did they give us Crystal Skull? Why did they have to go and ruin it by giving us...
I don't know, a question that will be asked for many times, and to some extent, with the idea of a new Indiana Jones film, I still think the three films should have been it. Should have called it a day. As you said, it gave the obligatory ride into the sunset. I would rather have seen something like the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles and taking the adventures of a young Indy than playing on this idea for a fourth film. There had been talk for many years of another Indiana Jones film, and several scripts were circulating, including one that, whether it was true or false, that would have Kevin Costner as Indy's estranged kid brother, which would have been an interesting way to go. But the film that we got felt like a combination of fan service, lots and lots of missteps. Didn't mind the setting being moved from the 30s to the 50s, because I thought that was interesting to have him up against the Russians. And I didn't mind the idea that we were getting into science fiction elements, because that's what the 1950s flying saucers was all about.
Yeah.
But all those elements didn't land. For whatever reason, the film that we got just feels an afterthought as opposed to a complete Indiana Jones story. Even the fan service of the return of Marion, the idea of the son in Shia LaBeouf, who was clearly miscast in that particular movie. I think I'd rather have gone with the Kevin Costner younger brother.
Yeah. I mean, when this film was in production, Spielberg was insisting that it wouldn't be CGI heavy and there was going to be a lot of practical effects. But then as soon as the film starts with a CGI prairie dog popping out the ground, you immediately realise there's a bait and switch gone on. And the film ended up being clumsy and disjointed. The action sequences are let down either by poor editing, the chase through the jungle scene, for example, poor CGI, again, the chase through the jungle scene, or poor attempts at humour. Look, that jungle scene is just atrocious. let's just stick with that.
Yeah, I never want to see swinging monkeys ever again in an Indiana Jones film.
And then we have the fridge, which has replaced jumping the shark with nuking the fridge as a result, as the point in a franchise where you just lose all hope that it's got anything to deliver.
And do you know where that scene comes from?
Where did it come from?
It comes from an original script to Back to the Future. That was how Marty McFly was going to get back to present day. And that was the original ending of Back to the Future.
The problem with the fridge is, I mean, someone tried saying, oh, well, you know, the lead-lined fridge would have protected him from radiation. It's like, no. It might have protected the radiation, but the intense heat would have melted the lead around the body. And the fact that it launched about 1.5 miles before bouncing on the ground, it would have broken every bone in that body. So it should have landed, the door flops open, and a charred, broken corpse of Indiana Jones rolls out, roll end credits. That's how someone needs to re-edit that film, because then you've only got half an hour of a terrible, terrible film to watch, and you can just wipe it out of existence. It was a mess of a film, and I'm like you. I'm not sold on the next one. I'm not sold that we need it. I'll give it a chance. I hope that it recovers a bit, but I do like to think of this as a trilogy of films.
I totally agree. Just before we close this, I certainly believe that with the fifth film, and not having Spielberg at the helm, this is such a monumental way to make an apology for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that they know that how polarized the fans were over that movie. There has to be an aim not to nuke the fridge with this one. Our deep dive this week is one of those very rare things. A Steven Spielberg film that was not as financially or critically successful as many other of his films, even though it received a belated popularity after an expanded version aired on American television, and its subsequent TV on cable TV and home video rose it to the level of cult status. Which Steven Spielberg film are we talking about? Well, it was written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, who brought us Back to the Future. It starred an ensemble cast which featured Dan Aykroyd, Ned Beatty, John Belushi, John Candy, Christopher Lee, Tim Matheson, and Toshiro Mifune, as well as Mickey Rourke and Robert Stack in small parts. And the story involves a panic in Los Angeles after the December Pearl Harbor attack in the year 1941.
December 1941. The California coast. The Japanese had just bombed Pearl Harbor. A nation's heroes were on the alert.
Look, you guys, a Jap's up!
The dummy's right.
California could be next.
What are you guys shooting at? I don't know!
This is war.
Oh, God.
A country's honor was at stake. The lives of millions would be protected by a brave few. This is their story.
Excuse us, ma'am.
From the director of Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the most explosive comedy spectacular ever filmed.
What the hell do you people think you're doing?
Dan Aykroyd, Ned Beatty, John Belushi, Lorraine Garrett, Murray Hamilton, Christopher Lee, Tim Matheson, Toshiro Mifune, Warren Oates, Robert Stack, Treat Williams.
I can assure you, there will be no bombs dropped here.
Boy, that was fun!
Universal Pictures and Columbia Pictures present an 18 production of a Steven Spielberg film. 1941.
Sayonara, sucker!
When we think of Steven Spielberg, we don't think big, all-out, crazy comedy. Usually that territory is left to someone like John Landis. But no, he tackled 1941. The chaos of the events following the Pearl Harbor attack. And it's summarized by Dan Aykroyd's character, Sergeant Tree, who states he cannot stand Americans fighting Americans. This film is closer to It's a Mad, 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 Mad World than it is to any other Steven Spielberg film. This is the film that subsequently let Steven Spielberg move on to Raiders of the Lost Ark and E.T. So it's important. But as we said, it's not particularly well thought of. However, it's a film that Andy and I both like a lot for the fact that it is a crazy comedy that really holds together in the flimsiest of ways. Great cast, great settings, fantastic special effects. Andy, 1941.
This is a film that I've held a torch for many years, but I thought that I was alone in it. And it's only when you recommended it as a deep dive, I was like, you like it as well. Excellent.
It's a bit like a dirty secret, isn't it? Oh,
yeah,
you like 1941.
Yeah, saying it normally in polite society, you get shunned from parties. You get stripped of your film licenses. I mean, if you in the old days of renting films from Blockbuster, if you went in and asked if they had 1941, they'd revoke your membership and kick you out. That's how disregarded this film is. I remember seeing this as a kid, early 80s VHS, and I heard after I watched it that it was widely regarded as a mess, even though I kind of enjoyed it when I was watching it. And despite being told by many that I shouldn't revisit it as I got older because it's terrible, in my early 20s, I did. I took that plunge and I revisited it to see whether it was just 8-year-old me had loved this film because you're an 8-year-old and you're stupid. And in my early 20s, when I watched it, I found a lot of fun still to be had with it. And since then, it's become an occasional revisit. Every 4 or 5 years, I'll stick this on again. Yes, the film is patchy. Yes, it stays on far too long for a comedy farce. I mean, it's almost 2 hours in the standard cut, and the director's cut is 146 minutes.
Wow, I've never seen that. Never seen that version.
But by golly, there's a lot of fun moments within this that just land so well for me. Like you say, it's set in the days after the attack on Pearl Harbor. The west coast of the US is paranoid that another attack's going to hit the mainland, and all the forces are deployed, causing mayhem and chaos to the areas they occupy. Out in the ocean, a Japanese sub manned by the most inept crew ever, alongside a Nazi officer played by the ever-excellent Christopher Lee, stalks the waters seeking a target, hoping to locate Hollywood and make an impact before they can return to Japan with honor. And from the start, Spielberg is having fun. He starts the film with a parody of his opening moments of Jaws. The skinny dipping scene is reenacted. Only this time, it's not a shark under the water, it's a submarine. And from that point onwards, I was caught. I was chuckling and I was thrown from one scene to the next. I rewatched this a couple of days ago, and the scattershot effect with which he throws all the mini sketches and like additional storylines together. You have like 3 minutes with these characters, then you bounce over to these ones and bounce over to these ones. So if you don't care too much for one section, that's fine, because John Belushi's Captain Wild Bill Kelso will be up in a few minutes, and boy, he's a genuine highlight. It's one of these, throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And for me, more of it sticks than what falls.
I'll give you that, Andy. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, let's be honest. It is a bit of a mess of a film. Too many characters who aren't necessarily always funny. Spielberg loves his slapstick gags, and whether that's a slapstick gag that involves people or machinery like tanks and planes, it's a love letter to planes, and we've seen Spielberg tackle this before. It's got a great cast. It's got an old-fashioned feel. As I said, it's a mad world. It reminds me of that. It's slightly as though he has this huge pot and he just throws everything into it. And now some of it makes for a great recipe, and some of it he just overcooks. But it's got a great energy to it. And even though it is flawed, it's flawed because it's not that it's a terrible film. It's flawed because it's a director who was at the top of his game, given too much freedom. And we've talked about this with other directors. And he went on a jaunt to make the kind of 1940s to the 1960s screwball, big budget, star-packed vehicle of old. And it feels like a love letter, let alone the effects sequence, which are absolutely stunning. It's just a little bit all over the place. But if you can get over the all over the place-ness of it, then there's a fine and beautifully crafted film at the heart of it that is hit and miss. And I agree. There are a lot of misses, but there's some great hits. And if you're in the right mood for it and you go in expecting that, then it works. It's funny because I knew of the film before I saw it, because it didn't do well in the States. It got a quite a limited release in the UK, and in fact appeared in one of those sort of cinemas where you used to get films that were coming round again after a second release or hadn't quite done well. And so I never saw it in its full glory, but I absolutely loved it. And I loved everything connected to it. I loved the look of the film, and I had the poster on my wall. And I love Stephen Bissett and Rick Veitch's wild take on the comic book adaptation of it, which was absolutely crazy. In fact, Steven Spielberg distanced himself from it. But as Bob Gale said, it's down in history books as a big flop, but it wasn't. The movie didn't make the kind of money that Spielberg's films usually did, but the film was by no means a flop, and both Universal and Columbia have come out of it just fine. And I think that's it. I think you because you think of it as a flop, you go in expecting it to be terrible. It's not terrible. It's great. It's not always particularly funny, but it's a visual riot, and you just stick with it. And there's a reason he never went back to that kind of filmmaking, because it doesn't always work. But just seeing it is an absolute visual treat. And because of that, because he reined himself in, and because he knew he'd gone over budget, and he delivered his first flop to a studio, when it came to Raiders of the Lost Ark, he would take much more control over the budget and much more control about delivering on time. And therefore, without this film, we wouldn't have got Raiders, we wouldn't have got E.T., and I don't think we would have got the Spielberg we know today.
The casting in 1941, you rattled off some names earlier on, and that doesn't even scratch the surface of all the people who pop up within here that you'll recognise. But the highlights, I mean, I've already mentioned John Belushi's Captain Wild Bill Kelso,
who's a crazed fighter pilot on perfect manic form. And one thing that I love on his character is the eccentricities of, he never seems to drink. He always gets off, he takes a swig and then spits it straight out. And there's a great sequence where he lands outside an army base and goes in to get an updated report on what's happening. And he walks along and everyone's giving him a drink and it's spit, and then walks back out doing exactly the same. And it's just so perfectly ridiculous that it has me chuckling every time that I watch it. Slim Pickens has a moment in the film that's completely inconsequential to the rest of the story, but it was just an excuse to get Slim Pickens abducted by Japanese submarine naval officers and tortured with prune juice. And it's hilarious. It's a cracking 10 minutes approximately he's in the film for, and that's all that he does. He gets abducted, doesn't disclose any information, and escapes. But the whole sequence is brilliant. It's absolutely marvellous. And you even get the great Robert Stack, who you briefly mentioned. He gets a chance to shine as Major Sitwell, who makes me chuckle at how emotional he gets at Disney's Dumbo as he sat watching it while all the mayhem's going on outside the movie theatre. Like I said, there's a lot to love in this film. But, and here's the slight issue, sometimes the humour leaves you wincing because it's not aged very well. There's racial caricatures. There's an attempted assault that is played for laughs. There's blatant misogyny, which may be reflective not of the time that the film was made, late 70s, early 80s, but the time it was set in. But Spielberg isn't as skillful in approach as someone like Mel Brooks when it comes to handling such sensitive issues. And his use of this type of comedy feels awkward and it feels misplaced. There's an attempt to do reverse blackface with whiteface at the same time, which happens towards the end of the film with the tank crew, which kind of doesn't work because it then resorts to the now blacked up John Candy being told by the now whiter Frank McRae to get to the back of the tank and feeling really upset that he's been put into the lower position. And yes, it's satirizing the values of the 40s, but it just feels unnecessary and it feels somewhat nasty.
Yeah, I think there is a mean spirit to it. There's nobody that's ever really particularly likable in this film, and I think that's, again, one of the reasons why it didn't engage. We know that it made money, but it just didn't engage. Look, this is not that it's not Spielberg firing on all cylinders. Whatever you think of the film, it's a glorious looking movie with some fantastic spectacle, some spectacular special effects. And yes, some great set pieces. It's just one of those screwball comedies that it's not Steven Spielberg's genre to do screwball. Somebody like John Landis, I think, would have done a better job on this. And it just collapses under a glut of ideas. And at times it's confusing and it's awkward in its laughs. But as a piece of filmmaking, and that alone gives it the perfect reason to sit and watch it. Whether you think it's funny or not by the end of it, you're still in for a visual treat and you'll have never seen anything like it. And you know what? You'll never see this kind of comedy, this big scale, huge screwball comedy again. It really is a part of an era. And maybe, again, that's where they went wrong. Maybe in the 60s, this kind of film would have worked.
When it lands really well. The humour, when it lands, the slapstick elements really play well. It's a joyously satirical approach to wartime hysteria. And it, like you say, it looks spectacular. It well and truly deserved the Oscar nomination that it received for the special effects. And, of course, the music from John Williams. The rousing march main theme is possibly one of his best pieces of his career, in my opinion. It's an awkward film. It's a messy film. But it's an unashamedly fun film at the same time. And it's definitely worth a watch. If you've always been put off with this because you've heard that it was a bomb, you've heard that it was a disaster, don't let anyone else sway your opinion. Give it a watch yourself. You might find something to love in it, the same way that even though I recognise the faults in it, I still embrace the film overall. And that's it for this look back at some old deep dives all about Steven Spielberg films. We'll be back soon with a regular show looking at all the usual news, reviews, and neat things. Remember, if you want to get in touch with the show and recommend some films that you think we should check out, or just want to share your opinion on anything film or anything geeky, you know what to do. Podcast
filmfile.uk is the email address to send it over to. Thank you very much. Hope you all have a lovely week ahead of you. And remember, as always, watch more films.